The morning sun rose over Colony World's Seojin 4 like any other day. Children ran to their schools while parents headed to work in the fields and factories. The colony had been peaceful for 3 generations, a small human settlement on the edge of known space. Everyone knew each other. Everyone felt safe. That safety shattered when the ships arrived. They came without warning. Massive vessels that blocked out the sun as they descended. The Korthon Empire had sent a full military fleet to a farming colony. Governor Jiho stood in his office, watching the ships land in the central square, his hands shaking as he tried to understand what was happening. The Korthon commander was a towering figure named Velman. His species looked like walking armor. With thick plates covering their bodies and eyes that glowed with a cold light, he walked into the governor's building without asking permission, followed by 20 armed soldiers. Governor Jiho Velman said, his voice harsh and mechanical. "We come with lawful authority from the Galactic Council." Jiho felt his stomach drop. Lawful authority? For what purpose? Velman held out a datapad. Council Law 2847, written 3,000 years ago. It grants member species the right to claim genetic resources from colony populations when needed for species survival. Human children possess genetic markers that our breeding programs require. We are here to collect them. The words didn't make sense at first. Jiho read the document 3 times before the meaning hit him. You want to take our children? Not want, we'll take. The law is clear. That law is ancient. Nobody has used it in thousands of years. It cannot possibly still be valid. The council disagrees. We filed proper paperwork. We received proper approval. Everything is legal. Jiho stood up, his fear turning to anger.
Yeah.
I will not let you take children from their families. Take adults instead. Take volunteers. Take me if you need human genetics, but leave the children alone. Velman shook his head slowly. The law specifies juveniles between ages 4 and 12. Their genetics integrate better into our modification programs. Adults are useless to us. Then you will leave this world with nothing. No, Velman said. We will leave with 847 children. That is the number we calculated. You have 1 hour to prepare them for transport, or we will collect them ourselves. Jiho tried to contact Earth. He tried to reach the Galactic Council. He sent emergency messages to every human world he could reach. But the Korthon were jamming all communications outside the planet. Nobody would know what was happening until it was over. The hour passed. Velman kept his word. Korthon soldiers spread through the colony like a plague. They had lists with names and addresses. They went to schools first, walking into classrooms and pulling children from their seats. Teachers tried to stop them and were thrown aside. Some were shot when they refused to move. In the farming district, a man named Hun Woo was working in his field when he saw Korthon soldiers approaching his home. His daughter Suji was inside with her mother Mina. He dropped his tools and ran. He reached his house just as soldiers were dragging Suji out the door. The little girl was screaming for her mother. Hyunwoo threw himself at the nearest soldier, his fists pounding uselessly against armored plating. Let her go. She's only 6 years old. Please. The soldier didn't even slow down. Another soldier turned and fired a weapon. Blast hit Hyunwoo in the chest and he fell. Mina screamed and ran to her husband, cradling his head as blood spread across his shirt. Daddy! Suji cried, reaching back toward her parents. The soldier carried her away like she weighed nothing. All across the colony, the same scene repeated. Parents fought with their bare hands against armed soldiers. Some were killed. Others were beaten unconscious. The Korthon were efficient and merciless. They had done this before on other worlds to other species. They knew how to break resistance quickly. By evening, 847 children had been loaded into transport ships. They ranged from 4 years old to 12. Some were crying. Others were too shocked to make any sound at all. The Korthon herded them like animals, separating them into groups and locking them in holding cells. 12-year-old Min Jae tried to keep the younger children calm. He had been taken from his school, along with his entire class. Now he found himself in a cell with 30 other terrified kids. Stay together, he whispered to them. Remember your names. Remember your families. Don't let them make you forget. In the governor's office, Geo sat in his chair with his head in his hands. The Korthon had left him a formal document sealed with the Galactic Council's mark. Everything they had done was technically legal. Ancient law permitted it. The Council had approved it. It was no crime to report. Velman appeared in his doorway one last time. Your species has been part of the Council for 2,000 years. You know how the law works, accept what has happened, and move forward. The Council will provide reparations for your losses. Losses? Jiho looked up with empty eyes. You call our children losses? I call them resources. The law calls them resources. The Council calls them resources. What you call them does not matter. The Korthon ships lifted off as the sun set. Families gathered in the square, watching the vessels disappear into the sky. Some people were still looking for their children, not believing they were really gone. Others sat in silence, too broken to move. Mina held her dead husband in her arms until neighbors came to help her. Hyenwoo's blood had dried on her clothes. His last words had been their daughter's name. The Korthon fleet jumped to slipstream space and vanished from the system. They left. Behind a colony full of shattered families and a legal document that made everything they had done acceptable under galactic law, Governor Jiho finally managed to break through the communication jamming. His message to Earth was simple and devastating. They came. They took our children. They said it was legal. They said the Council approved it. Please help us. The message traveled across space toward Earth, carrying news that would change everything. For 2,000 years, humanity had been the galaxy's peacekeepers and diplomats. They had voluntarily given up war and violence. They had chosen peace over power. Nobody in the galaxy understood what was about to happen. Nobody remembered what humanity had been like before they chose peace. Nobody realized that peace had always been a choice, not a weakness. The Korthon Empire had just made the worst mistake in galactic history. They had taken humanity's children and expected humanity to accept it. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. The message from SEO 4 reached Earth 3 days later. By the time it arrived, every human world had already heard what happened. The news had spread like fire. Parents across thousands of light years held their children closer and felt their hearts break for families they had never met. Earth's council chambers had never been so full. Representatives from every human colony gathered in person or by hologram. Nobody spoke. They all watched the footage from SEO 4 in silence. They saw children being torn from their parents' arms. They saw Hyenwoo die, trying to protect his daughter. They saw 847 children loaded onto ships like cargo. Ambassador Bora stood at the center of the chamber. She had served the Galactic Council for 40 years, working to keep peace between species, mediating disputes, and building bridges. She had believed in the Council's mission with all her heart. Now she looked at the faces around her and saw her own rage reflected back. The Council says it was legal, she said quietly. Council Law 2847 permits member species to claim genetic resources from colonies. The Korthon filed proper paperwork. They received approval. By the letter of the law, they did nothing wrong. Someone in the crowd shouted, "The law is evil." Yes, Bora agreed. It is. I have spent the last 3 days reading every word of that law. It was written during the old Empire days, when powerful species used to raid weaker ones for slaves and genetic material. Nobody has enforced it in 2,000 years, but it was never removed from the books. What does the Council say? Another representative asked. The Council acknowledges what happened. They express sympathy for our loss. They have offered to discuss reparations and possibly review the law for future changes. Bora's voice hardened. They suggest we move forward and not damage galactic peace over an unfortunate incident. The chamber erupted. People were shouting, crying, demanding action. Bora let them rage for several minutes before raising her hand for silence. I am flying to the Council homeworld tomorrow, she said. I will present our case before the full Council Assembly. I will demand our children be returned immediately. But I need you all to prepare for what comes next if they refuse. What comes next? Someone asked. We remind the galaxy what humanity used to be. The next day, Boris stood before the Galactic Council. The chamber was ancient and beautiful, built to represent peace and cooperation between species. Representatives from 300 different worlds sat in a great circle. At the center, on the highest seat, sat Chairman Thalvin of the reptilian species. He looked down at Bora with cold eyes. Ambassador Bora, you have requested this emergency session. The council grants you the floor. Bora did not use notes. She did not need them. 3 days ago, the Korthon Empire used an ancient law to kidnap 847 human children from a peaceful farming colony. They killed parents who tried to protect their children. They justified their actions with paperwork and council approval. I stand before you today with a simple request. Return our children immediately. Thalvin nodded slowly. The council understands your emotional response to this situation. However, the law is the law. The Korthon followed proper procedure. We cannot punish a species for acting within legal parameters. Then change the law. Laws cannot be changed retroactively. What is done is done. The council is prepared to offer substantial reparations to affected families and to review the law for future application. Bora's voice was ice. You think there will be a future application? You think we will let this happen again? Ambassador Bora, you must understand the council's position. We cannot undermine 3,000 years of legal structure because of one unfortunate incident. If we allow emotions to override law, the entire galactic order collapses. Then let it collapse. The chamber went silent. Thalvin leaned forward. Excuse me? Article 7 of the Council Charter, Bora said clearly. Any member species may withdraw from the Council by filing proper notice. I hereby file notice of humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives were shouting in dozens of languages. Thalvin was hammering his gavel, calling for order. Bora stood calmly in the center of the storm. You cannot do this, Thalvin shouted. Humanity has been a council member for 2,000 years. You are the species that brought peace to the galaxy. And now we are the species whose children were stolen while the council watched and called it legal. We will not remain members of an organization that permits this evil. If you withdraw from the council and take action against the Korthon Empire, you will be outlaws. Every council species will be authorized to act against you. You will start a war that could destroy everything we have built. Bora looked around the chamber at all the species watching her. Then she spoke words that would echo across the galaxy. For 2,000 years, humanity has chosen peace. We gave up our weapons. We dismantled our warships. We became diplomats and mediators because we believed in the Council's mission. But we never gave up our ability to fight. We simply chose not to use it. She paused. The Council has now made us choose between peace and our children. That is not a choice. We choose our children. We will retrieve them by any means necessary. And if that makes us outlaws, then the galaxy will learn what happens when humanity goes to war. She turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, the council dissolved into arguments and accusations. Some species supported humanity's position. Others called for sanctions and military action. The 2,000-year peace was cracking apart. On Earth, the transformation had already begun. Admiral Taijin had been retired for 15 years. Living quietly in the mountains and teaching history to students, now he stood in the rebuilt military command center. Watching as thousands of former soldiers reported for duty, the call had gone out across all human worlds. Veterans who had served in the peacekeeping forces, engineers who had worked on old warship designs, scientists who had studied military technologies before humanity gave up war. They all came without being ordered. They came because children had been taken. How long until we have a functional fleet? Taijin asked his chief engineer. 30 days if we rush construction? Maybe 40 for proper testing. We don't have 30 days. Those children are being modified right now. In 6 months, the changes become permanent. We need ships in 3 weeks, Admiral. That's impossible. Then do the impossible. Those families are counting on us. The engineer nodded and ran back to his team. Around them, factories that had built peaceful transport ships were being retooled. Orbital shipyards that had become tourist attractions were suddenly humming with activity. Sealed databases containing military designs from humanity's war-torn past were being opened for the first time in 2,000 years. The galaxy watched in disbelief as human worlds mobilized for war. Species that had known humanity only as peaceful diplomats suddenly saw factory worlds producing weapons at impossible speeds. Retired warships were being pulled from museums and upgraded with technologies nobody knew humans possessed. The Korthon Empire issued a statement saying humanity's threats were meaningless. They had the largest military in the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of systems. Humans had been peaceful farmers for 2,000 years. The Korthon were not worried. They should have been. 3 weeks after the taking, the first new human warship launched from Earth's orbital yard. It was named Retribution. Admiral Taijin stood on its bridge and looked at the crew around him. They were teachers, farmers, artists, parents. They had all chosen to become soldiers again. Set course for Korthon space, he ordered. We're bringing our children home. The ship jumped to slipstream space, followed by 88 others. The human fleet was smaller than the Korthon expected, but it was enough. It had to be enough. Behind them, Earth continued building. More ships were coming. More soldiers were training. Humanity had spent 2,000 years choosing peace. And the galaxy had forgotten what humanity looked like when they chose war. The Korthon Empire was about to receive a brutal reminder. The Korthon Empire controlled 47 star systems and commanded the third-largest military fleet in the galaxy. When they heard that humanity was coming for them, they laughed. High Commander Raycon stood in his war room, looking at the tactical display showing the human fleet approaching their border. 89 ships. The Korthon had assembled 200 warships to meet them, plus orbital defense platforms and planetary weapons. It would be a massacre. Let them come, Raycon said to his officers. We will destroy their fleet, kill their admiral, and send the wreckage back to Earth. Then they will understand that threatening the Korthon Empire has consequences. His officers cheered. They had fought dozens of wars. They had never lost. These humans had been peaceful gardeners for 2,000 years. This would be easy. They were wrong. The human fleet arrived at the Korthon border and did not slow down. Admiral Taijin stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as the Korthon fleet formed their battle lines. It was a standard defensive formation designed to maximize firepower while protecting their command ships. They fight like everyone else in the galaxy, Taijin said quietly. They learned warfare from the Council's approved tactics. They follow the rules of engagement. They try to minimize casualties and preserve their ships. He looked at his weapons officer. We are not going to do any of those things. Load all weapons. Prepare Assault Pattern Alpha. Yes, sir. Pattern Alpha is designed for total warfare. We haven't used those tactics in 2,000 years. The Council banned them as too brutal. We're not in the Council anymore. Fire when ready. The Korthon fleet opened fire first, launching missiles and energy beams at the approaching human ships. They expected the humans to return fire in the same way, to engage in a traditional space battle where ships traded shots until one side retreated. Instead, the human fleet split apart like water, moving in patterns that should not have been possible. Small drone ships that the Korthon had ignored as insignificant suddenly accelerated to ramming speed. Filled with explosives, they slammed into Korthon vessels before point defense systems could react. The explosions were massive. 3 Korthon ships vanished in balls of fire. The rest of the fleet broke formation, trying to adapt to this unexpected tactic. That was when the real attack began. Human ships were smaller than Korthon vessels, but they were faster and more maneuverable. They dove between the larger ships, targeting specific systems with precise shots. They were not trying to destroy ships. They were trying to cripple them. Life support systems failed on a dozen Korthon vessels. Crews found themselves suffocating, forced to broadcast surrender or die. Human ships ignored the weapons systems entirely, going straight for the engines and life support. It was tactical brilliance but also psychological warfare. The Korthon crews realized they were fighting an enemy that did not care about honor or tradition. An enemy that would let them suffocate in space if they did not surrender immediately. Commander, Akan watched his fleet fall apart in less than an hour. This was impossible. Humans were supposed to be weak. Humans were supposed to be peaceful. All ships, full assault. Destroy them, he screamed, but his ships could not get clear shots. The human fleet moved too fast, using the debris from destroyed Korthon vessels as cover, and then the human ships started broadcasting something on all frequencies. It was the sound of children crying. The recording was from Siajin 4, the sounds of children being torn from their parents, screaming for their mothers and fathers. The Korthon crews heard it on every channel, unable to shut it off. Some of them had children of their own. Some of them started to understand what they were fighting for. Morale broke. Ships began to surrender without firing another shot. Within 6 hours, the Korthon defensive fleet was destroyed or captured. The human fleet had lost 12 ships, but they had one. Admiral Taijin ordered the captured Korthon command ship to be boarded. Colonel Dayon led the Marine team personally. They moved through the ship with weapons ready, expecting resistance. They found Korthon officers huddled in their command center. Terrified, Raycon stood in the center, still trying to look brave. You cannot do this. We followed the law. The council will punish you for this attack. Dayon walked up to him and said something in a voice cold enough to freeze stars. We don't care about the council. We don't care about your laws. We care about our children. Tell us where they are. I will tell you nothing. Dayon nodded to his technical officer, who attached a small device to Raycon's head. It was truth-scanning technology, something humans had developed during their old wars and never revealed to the galaxy. The device read brain patterns and extracted information directly from memory. Raycon screamed as the machine worked. The other Korthon officers watched in horror. This was beyond anything the council permitted. This was barbaric. 3 minutes later, Dayon had everything he needed. The children are on Korthon Prime, your homeworld, in something you call a training facility. He looked at the coordinates on his display. How long until the genetic modifications become permanent? Rakan, broken by the truth scanner, answered without meaning to. 6 months. After 6 months, the changes cannot be reversed. How long has it been? Almost for months. Dayon felt ice in his stomach. They had 8 weeks to reach Korthon Prime, rescue 847 children from a heavily fortified facility, and reverse whatever modifications had been done to them. It should have been impossible. He activated his communication link to Admiral Taijin. Sir, we have the location. Korthon Prime, Central Continent, coordinates attached. But there's a complication. What complication? The genetic modifications become permanent in 8 weeks. We need to move fast. Taijin was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke words that made even his own officers go pale. Set course for Korthon Prime. We are going to invade their homeworld. The bridge crew stared at him. In 3,000 years of galactic civilization, nobody attacked homeworlds. It was the one unwritten rule that every species followed. Homeworlds were sacred. Billions of civilians lived there. Attacking a homeworld was considered an act of ultimate evil. Sir, his second officer said carefully, the council will consider this an unforgivable act. Every species in the galaxy will turn against us. Let them, Taijin said. We are getting our children back. I don't care what it costs. The human fleet regrouped and jumped to slipstream space, heading for Korthon Prime. Behind them, the wreckage of 200 Korthon warships drifted in space. News of the battle was already spreading across the galaxy. Species that had dismissed humanity's threats were suddenly very quiet. On Korthon Prime, in a facility deep underground, 847 human children sat in cells. They had been there for almost 4 months. Every day, Korthon scientists came and injected them with genetic modifiers. Every day, the children felt themselves changing in ways they could not understand. Suji sat in her cell, hugging her knees. She tried to remember what her mother looked like, but the memory was getting fuzzy. The Korthon kept telling them they had no families anymore, that humans had abandoned them, that they were Korthon property now. 12-year-old Minjay had organized the older children into groups. They whispered to the younger ones at night, telling them stories about Earth and human colonies, reminding them who they were. It was the only resistance they could manage. "Do you think anyone is coming for us?" a little boy asked Minjay one night. Minjay wanted to say yes, but he was not sure anymore. For months was a long time. Maybe the adults really had abandoned them. Maybe the Korthon were telling the truth. Then, on the morning of the 115th day of captivity, alarms started blaring throughout the facility. The Korthon guards ran through the corridors shouting orders in their language. The children could hear explosions in the distance. Something was happening above ground. Minjay pressed his face against the small window of his cell. In the sky above, he could see ships. Human ships. They were firing on the facility's defenses. "They came," he whispered. "They actually came for us." In her cell, Suji heard the explosions and started to cry. But for the first time in months, she was crying with hope. Admiral Taijin stood on the bridge of the Retribution as it entered orbit around Korthon Prime. Below them, the planet glowed with cities holding billions of Korthon civilians. Attacking this world violated every rule of modern warfare. He was about to do it anyway. "Admiral, we are receiving multiple emergency broadcasts from the Galactic Council," his communications officer reported. "They are begging us to stand down. They say they will negotiate the children's release if we retreat now." "They had 4 months to negotiate," Taijin said coldly. "Tell them we are done talking." "Weapons. Do you have a lock on the training facility?" "Yes, sir. But the facility is surrounded by civilian structures. Schools, hospitals, residential areas. If we miss by even 100 meters, we will kill thousands of civilians." "Then don't miss. Fire precision strikes on defensive shields and weapons only. Nothing else." The Retribution's weapon systems came alive. Across the fleet, every ship targeted the coordinates Daeon had extracted from the Korthon commander. The shots had to be perfect. One mistake would make humanity the monsters the galaxy would say they were. The weapons fired. Beams of concentrated energy lanced down from orbit, hitting the facility's shield generators with pinpoint accuracy. The shields flickered and died. Secondary strikes destroyed the anti-aircraft weapons mounted on the facility's roof. The building itself remained untouched. "Drop ships away," Taijin ordered. "All Marine teams proceed with extraction." 20 dropships launched from the fleet carrying 500 human Marines. Leading one team was Mina, the woman who had held her dying husband while the Korthon took her daughter. She had volunteered for military training the day after the taking. For 4 months, she had pushed herself harder than anyone else, driven by a single purpose. Now she sat in the dropship, checking her weapon for the 5th time. Around her, other Marines prepared in silence. Some were parents like her. Others had no children, but had volunteered anyway because this was about more than family. This was about humanity protecting its young. The dropships hit atmosphere, and the Korthon military finally responded. Fighters scrambled to intercept them. Ground-based weapons that had survived the orbital strike fired at the incoming ships. 2 dropships were hit and went down, their crews lost. Mina's ship shook from near misses, but kept descending. They hit the ground hard, and the doors exploded open. Marines poured out into a war zone. The Korthon had garrison troops defending the facility. They were well-trained and heavily armed. They opened fire immediately, and 3 Marines fell in the first seconds. But human Marines had trained for this. They moved with coordination born from desperation. Covering each other and pushing forward relentlessly, Mina ran with her squad toward the facility's main entrance. A Korthon soldier appeared in a window and fired. The shot hit her armor, and she felt ribs cracked, but she kept moving. Another Marine took down the shooter. They reached the door and blasted it open with explosives. Inside the facility, Korthon scientists were trying to evacuate their research. They saw humans coming and ran. Marines swept through the corridors, following maps that intelligence had provided. Some rooms held Korthon soldiers. Brief, brutal firefights erupted. The humans won every one. Colonel Dayon led a second team through the eastern entrance. They moved fast, knowing every second counted. The Korthon reinforcements were coming. They had maybe 4 hours before the entire Korthon military descended on this location. They found the first children in the medical wing. 20 kids strapped to tables, unconscious, with machines connected to their bodies. Dayon felt rage burn through him. He forced it down and focused on the mission. Medical team, get them out of those machines. Be careful. We don't know what will happen if we disconnect them wrong. Human medics rushed forward, working quickly but carefully. They had trained for this, studied Korthon medical technology, prepared for every possibility. But seeing it in person was different. These children looked wrong, their skin showing patterns of Korthon genetic markers. "Sir, we need at least 10 minutes per child to safely disconnect them," a medic reported. "You have 5? Work faster." Mina's squad reached the detention wing where most children were held. The corridor was lined with cells, each containing 1 or 2 children. Some kids were crying. Others just stared blankly, broken by months of captivity. "Suji," Mina shouted, running from cell to cell. "Suji, where are you?" She heard a small voice. "Mama." Mina found her daughter in the 8th cell. Suji was thinner than she should be. Her eyes were wrong colors, and she had marks on her arms where injections had been given repeatedly. But she was alive. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Mina blasted the lock off the door and pulled her daughter into her arms. Suji clung to her mother and sobbed. All around them, Marines were opening cells and pulling children out. Some kids could walk. Others could not, weakened by months of modification procedures. Marines carried them, 2 or 3 children at a time, rushing them toward the extraction point. Minjae helped the younger kids move. The 12-year-old had kept them strong during captivity, and now he helped them escape. He saw adults in human military uniforms, and he finally let himself believe they were going to survive. The evacuation was taking too long. Korthon reinforcements had arrived outside, and the fighting intensified. Human ships in orbit provided cover fire, but ground forces were getting overwhelmed. "We need more time." Dayon shouted into his cum. "We still have 200 kids to extract." Admiral Taijin watched the battle from orbit. More Korthon ships were arriving every minute. His fleet was outnumbered 5 to 1 now. If they stayed much longer, they might not escape at all. "Admiral, we have to go," his tactical officer said. "If we wait, we lose the whole fleet." Taejan looked at the display showing Marines fighting on the surface. Parents rescuing their children, kids who had suffered for 4 months finally being saved. He thought about leaving them behind. He could not do it. All ships hold position. "We leave when every child is on board." Not before, fleet held. Ships took heavy damage but did not retreat. The Retribution's shields failed and enemy fire raked across the hull. Crew members died at their stations, but the ship kept fighting. On the ground, Gyan found the last group of children in a sealed research lab. These were the ones the Korthon had modified the most, kept separate for intensive study. They looked even less human than the others, their bodies showing advanced changes. "Can we reverse this?" Dayon asked the medical team. "Won't know until we get them to proper facilities. But if we leave them here, they will definitely be lost. Get them on the ships." The final evacuation took 45 minutes of constant fighting. Marines carried children through corridors while Korthon soldiers fired at them. Some Marines stayed behind, holding positions to give the others time to escape. They knew they were sacrificing themselves. The last dropship lifted off with Mina and Suji aboard. Mina held her daughter and refused to let go. Around them, other parents reunited with their children, crying and holding them close. But not all dropships made it back. 3 were shot down during ascent. 70 Marines died. The children they were carrying were rescued by other ships. Those Marines were gone. Captain Youngmi commanded the cruiser Defender. Her ship had taken catastrophic damage holding the line. Systems were failing. The Korthon focused fire on her, trying to break through to the dropships. "Captain, we need to abandon ship." Her crew shouted. Youngmi looked at her screens. A Korthon carrier was moving to intercept the escaping dropships. If it reached firing position, it would destroy at least 3 ships full of children. She made her choice. All crew to escape pods. Launch immediately. I am staying, Captain. No. That's an order. Go now. Her crew evacuated in 90 seconds. Youngmi sat alone on her bridge and turned her dying ship toward the Korthon carrier. She pushed the engines to maximum, accelerating directly at the enemy vessel. The Korthon realized what she was doing and tried to destroy her ship before impact. They damaged her engines and weapons. But they could not stop her momentum. The Defender crashed into the carrier at 10,000 kilometers per hour. Both ships exploded in a fireball visible from the planet's surface. 300 Korthon crew died instantly. So did Captain Youngmi, but the dropships escaped. Admiral Taijin watched it happen and felt something break inside him. Youngmi had served with him for 20 years. She had a husband on Earth. She had grandchildren. All ships jumped to slipstream space. We are leaving. The human fleet, battered and burning, retreated from Korthon space. They had suffered heavy casualties. But every dropship was full of children. All 847 children had been recovered. Not one was left behind as they jumped away. Taijin stood alone on his damaged bridge and let himself cry for the people who had died to make this rescue possible. They had paid a terrible price, but they had brought humanity's children home. The human fleet arrived at Medical Station Unity 3 days after the rescue. The station floated in neutral space, built specifically to handle the children's recovery. Every medical specialist humanity possessed had gathered there, along with equipment brought from dozens of human worlds. Mina carried Suji off the ship personally, refusing to let anyone else touch her daughter. Suji had not spoken much during the journey. She clung to her mother, but seemed distant, like part of her was still trapped in that Korthon facility. Doctors examined all 847 children. The reports were heartbreaking. Every child showed signs of genetic modification. Some changes were minor, just surface markers that could be corrected. Others were deeper, affecting how their bodies functioned. A few children had been changed so much that full reversal might be impossible. But the doctors worked day and night. They used every technique humanity had developed, and some new ones they invented on the spot. Slowly, carefully, they began to undo what the Korthon had done. Minjae, the 12-year-old who had kept the children strong during captivity, recovered faster than most. He spent his time visiting the younger children, especially those who were struggling. He told them the same thing he had whispered in those dark cells. Remember who you are. Remember your families. Don't let them take that from you. 2 weeks after the rescue, Ambassador Bora received a message from the Galactic Council. They wanted her to return for an emergency session. She almost refused, but curiosity made her go. The council chamber looked different when she arrived. Many seats were empty. Species that had always attended were absent. Others had sent junior representatives instead of their ambassadors. The carefully maintained unity of 3,000 years was crumbling. Chairman Thalvin sat in his high seat, but he looked older and tired. He waited until Bora reached the center of the chamber before speaking. Ambassador Bora, humanity has committed acts of war against a council member species, destroyed their fleet. You invaded their home world, killed thousands of their people. The council demands you answer for these crimes. Bora looked around at the watching species. Then she activated a holographic display and showed them footage from the rescue. The children strapped to tables, genetic modifications being done to them. The cells where kids had been kept like animals for 4 months. These are the crimes you should be demanding answers for, she said quietly. This is what your laws permitted. This is what happened while you talked about legal procedures and proper paperwork. The law has been changed, Thalvin said. Council Law 2847 has been removed. No species will be permitted to claim genetic resources from another species' children again. Changed after 847 children were tortured. Changed after humanity left the council and went to war. You should have changed it 3,000 years ago. Bora paused. But I am not here to argue about what should have been done. I am here to tell you what will be done now. You are not in a position to make demands. Yes, we are, because 30 other species have withdrawn from the Council in the last 2 weeks. They saw what we did, and they remembered that they have children too. They remembered that your ancient laws have not been updated since the Empire days. They are forming a new coalition, and they have asked humanity to lead it. The chamber erupted. Representatives were shouting, some in anger and others in support. Thalvin hammered his gavel uselessly. This is madness. It will destroy the galactic order. The galactic order was built on rotten foundations. Better to tear it down and build something new? Bora activated another display. These are our terms. The Council will undergo complete reformation. Every law will be reviewed by representatives from all species, not just the old powers. Protection of children and civilians will be absolute. Any species that violates these protections will face immediate action. And if we refuse, then the new coalition will enforce these rules without you. We have 40 fleets now, including humanities. We have the industrial power of dozens of worlds. We have species who are tired of being afraid. She looked directly at Thalvin. You can join us and help build a better system, or you can stand aside and become irrelevant. The choice is yours. Thalvin stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the chamber. He stood up and removed the chairman's medallion from his neck. I resign my position, and the Council needs new leadership for a new era. He looked at Bora. You have broken the old order. I hope you can build something better to replace it. We walked out of the chamber. Around the room, representatives began to talk urgently to each other. Bora did not wait for them to decide. She had said what needed to be said. While the Council fell apart, the Korthon Empire faced its own reckoning. Their military was shattered. Their home world had been invaded. Species they had bullied for centuries were suddenly demanding answers for old crimes. The new Korthon leadership contacted Earth directly, bypassing the Council entirely. They offered complete surrender, reparations, 2 affected families, an agreement to submit to war crimes tribunals. They had no choice. Humanity had proven they could destroy the Korthon Empire if they wanted to. Mercy was more than the Korthon deserved. Admiral Taijin supervised the treaty negotiations personally. He insisted on every detail being perfect. The Korthon would pay for rebuilding Seojin 4. They would provide medical care for every affected child. They would reduce their military to defensive forces only. Most importantly, they would hand over every officer involved in the taking to face justice. This is harsh, the Korthon negotiator said. You are destroying our empire. You destroyed 847 childhoods, Taijin replied. You killed parents in front of their children. You modified kids like they were lab animals. Be grateful we are only destroying your empire. We could have destroyed your species. The Korthon signed the treaty. 6 months after the taking, Seojin 4 began to rebuild. Governor Jiho oversaw construction of new homes and schools. In the central square, where Korthon ships had once landed, workers built a memorial. It was a simple wall with 847 names carved into it. The children who had been taken. Below their names were the names of those who had died rescuing them. Hunwoo, the farmer who fought soldiers with his bare hands. Captain Youngmi, who crashed her ship to save dropships full of children. Marines who stayed behind so others could escape. Mina came to the memorial on the day it was unveiled. Suji stood beside her, holding her mother's hand. The little girl looked almost normal now. Doctors had reversed most of the modifications, though she would always have small marks on her arms where the injections had been given. Is Daddy here? Suji asked, looking at the names. Yes, baby. Daddy is here. He protected you until the very end. They placed flowers at the wall, along with hundreds of other families. All around them, the colony was coming back to life. Children played in the streets again. Parents watched them closely, unwilling to let them out of sight for long. The galaxy had changed. The old council was being reformed under new leadership that included species from the coalition humanity had formed. Ancient laws were being reviewed and updated. Protection of children became absolute in galactic law, enforced by fleets from multiple species. Humanity's role changed too. Human ships now patrolled trade routes, protecting weaker species from aggressive ones. Human marines trained other species' security forces. The galaxy's peacekeepers had become its enforcers, and nobody questioned their authority anymore. Admiral Tai Jin stood on Earth, looking up at the stars. He was tired and wanted to retire again, but he knew he could not. Not yet, not while the galaxy was still adjusting to the new order. He thought about the price they had paid, the lives lost, the peace broken. The reputation as gentle diplomats replaced by a reputation as warriors who would destroy empires for their children. He thought it was worth it. In his final report to Earth's Council, he wrote something that would be taught to every human child from that day forward. For 2,000 years, humanity chose peace because we remembered the cost of war. We gave up our weapons and became the galaxy's mediators because we believed civilization could be better than violence. The galaxy mistook our choice for weakness. They thought peaceful meant harmless. They learned the truth the hard way. We are not peaceful because we cannot fight. We're peaceful because we understand exactly how dangerous we can be. We chose peace over power, diplomacy over domination, because we believed it was right. But when forced to choose between peace and our children, there was never any doubt which we would pick. The galaxy knows now. Touch our children, and we will burn your empires to ash. Threaten our families, and we will break any law to protect them. Call us outlaws if you want. We choose our children over your approval, every time, without hesitation. That is what it means to be human. Report was sent across all human worlds and leaked to the greater galaxy. Species read it and understood. Humanity had drawn a line. Cross it at your own risk. On Medical Station Unity, the last child was cleared for release. All 847 had been treated. Most would recover fully. Some would carry scars forever. But they were alive and they were home. Min Jae, who had kept them strong during the darkest days, stood with the other children as they prepared to return to their families. He was 13 now, older than his years after everything he had experienced.